The tears fell unbidden down Vivian O'Malley's pale cheeks as she sat on the wooden steps of the abandoned church, her wedding dress collecting dust from the parched New Mexico soil. The year was 1875, and the small frontier town of Copper Creek had witnessed many disappointments, but none so public as the jilting of the young schoolteacher on her wedding day. The church bell hung silent above her, unmoved since the congregation had dispersed hours ago, whispering and pointing as they left. Vivian's fingers clutched the delicate lace of her dress, now stained with the dirt of the church steps and the evidence of her grief. 23 years old, and already marked by scandal in a town where reputations were as precious as water in the desert. She'd come to Copper Creek a year ago, full of ambition and hope, ready to teach the children of ranchers and shopkeepers alike. Then she'd met Thomas Whitley, the banker's son, with his promises of security and companionship. Not love, perhaps, but something stable in this unstable land. But Thomas had not appeared. The guests had waited, murmuring in the pews, until finally her father had announced there would be no wedding today. The humiliation burned worse than the New Mexico sun. "Reckon that bell ain't gonna ring itself, miss." Vivian lifted her tear-stained face to see a tall figure silhouetted against the setting sun. A stranger, with broad shoulders and a well-worn hat pulled low over his eyes. A dusty duster coat hung from his frame, and she could make out the glint of spurs on his boots. "I have no reason to ring it," she replied, her voice hoarse from crying. "The wedding is off." The stranger stepped closer, and she could see him more clearly now. Weathered skin spoke of long days under the relentless sun, but his eyes were kind, a startling blue against his tanned face. He couldn't have been more than 30. "Name's Finn Xavier," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Most folks just call me Finn." "Vivian O'Malley," she replied automatically, the social graces her mother had drilled into her surfacing despite her distress. "Well, Miss O'Malley, I just rode into town looking for work, and I couldn't help but notice a bride without a wedding." He gestured toward the bell. "That bell up there, my pa always said an unrung bell brings bad luck. Maybe ringing it will change your fortunes." Vivian gave a bitter laugh. "I doubt anything could salvage this day, Mr. Xavier." "Just Finn," he corrected gently. "And you'd be surprised what the right sound at the right time can do." Without waiting for her permission, he climbed the few steps to the church door and found the bell rope hanging just inside. With a strong pull, he sent the bell into motion. The clear, resonant tone rang out across Copper Creek, startling a flock of birds into flight. The sound seemed to vibrate through Vivian's very bones, washing away some of her shame and sorrow with each peal. Finn rang it 3 times, then let the rope fall still. "There," he said, returning to her side. "Now luck's got a chance to find you." "You're not from around here," Vivian observed, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "No, madam, been working cattle drives up from Texas. Thought I might settle somewhere for a spell, getting too old to sleep on the ground every night." His smile revealed a dimple in his right cheek, unexpected in his otherwise rugged face. "Copper Creek isn't much," Vivian said, glancing around at the dusty Main Street. "Just a mining town past its prime. Seems peaceful enough, and it's got a school, I see." He nodded toward the small schoolhouse down the road. "Any chance they're looking for a handyman? I'm good with tools." Vivian felt a small smile tug at her lips despite everything. "I'm the teacher. And as a matter of fact, the school roof leaks something terrible when it rains." "Well then," Finn said, extending his hand to help her up, "seems like I'm in the right place after all." Vivian hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His palm was rough with calluses, but his grip was gentle as he helped her to her feet. Standing, she suddenly became aware of her disheveled appearance, the wedding dress that now seemed so foolish, her hair falling from its careful arrangement. "Thank you for the distraction, Mr. Finn. But I should go home and face my family. Would you mind if I walked with you? Town's not big, but I don't know my way around yet." Vivian considered refusing, but found she didn't want to be alone with her thoughts. "That would be fine, it's not far." As they walked down the main street, Vivian was acutely aware of the curious eyes peering from shop windows and porches. By morning, everyone would be talking about the jilted bride walking home with a mysterious cowboy. "So tell me," Finn said conversationally, as if they weren't the subject of intense scrutiny, "what made you decide to teach in a place like this?" Vivian was grateful for the mundane question. "I came west for adventure, I suppose. My father was a prospector who struck it lucky enough to send me to school back east. When I finished my education, I wanted to give something back to communities like the one I grew up in." She glanced at him. "What about you? What brings a Texas cowboy to New Mexico?" Finn's expression clouded slightly. Change of scenery. Sometimes a man needs to start fresh. Before Vivian could inquire further, they arrived at a modest house on the edge of town. The lantern was lit inside, and Vivian could see the shadows of her parents moving about. "This is me," she said, stopping at the gate. "Thank you for walking me home." Finn nodded, replacing his hat. "My pleasure, Miss O'Malley. I hope tomorrow brings better fortunes." "The school board meets tomorrow afternoon at 4, Vivian found herself saying. "If you're serious about that handyman position." A slow smile spread across his face. "I'll be there." He tipped his hat and turned to go. Vivian watched him for a moment, then called, "The bell, do you really think it changes luck?" Finn looked back over his shoulder. "Well, it brought me to you, didn't it? I'd call that lucky for me." With those words hanging in the air between them, he continued down the road, his tall figure gradually disappearing into the gathering dusk. Inside, Vivian faced the sympathetic faces of her parents. Her mother rushed to embrace her while her father stood awkwardly by, his weathered face creased with concern. "Oh, my poor girl," her mother crooned, stroking Vivian's hair. "What a dreadful, dreadful day." "I'm all right, Mother," Vivian said, gently extracting herself from the embrace. "Truly." "Who was that man?" her father asked, his protective instincts clearly aroused. "Just a newcomer to town. He's looking for work as a handyman." Vivian removed her veil, placing it carefully on the sideboard. "I mentioned the school board meeting tomorrow," her father harumphed. "Convenient timing, him showing up today of all days." "Patrick," her mother admonished, "the poor girl's been through enough without your suspicions." Vivian managed a small smile. "He was kind, father, nothing more." Later, in the privacy of her room, Vivian changed out of her wedding dress, folding it away with mixed emotions. As she brushed out her long chestnut hair, she found herself thinking of Finn Xavier's striking blue eyes and the way he'd made her smile on what should have been the worst day of her life. The memory of the bell's clear tone lingered in her mind as she drifted off to sleep. The next morning dawned bright and clear, typical for June in New Mexico territory. Vivian rose early, determined to face the town with her head held high. She dressed in her most professional attire, a navy skirt and white shirtwaist, and pinned her hair in a neat bun. The walk to the schoolhouse was an exercise in dignity. She nodded politely to those she passed, ignoring the whispers that followed in her wake. By the time she reached the small building that served as both school and community meeting place, she felt armored against the day. To her surprise, Finn Xavier was already there, examining the roof from the ground. "Good morning," he called as she approached. "Hope you don't mind me taking a look. Wanted to know what I'm getting into if the board approves." "Not at all," Vivian replied, fishing her key from her reticule. "Would you like to see inside as well?" The schoolroom was simple but well kept, with rows of desks facing a larger teacher's desk and blackboard. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dancing dust motes. "It's not much," Vivian said, watching Finn take in the space, "but it serves our purpose." "It's a fine school," he replied, running his hand along one of the desks. "My own education happened in places with far less. Did you attend school regularly?" Vivian asked, curiosity getting the better of her when I could. "My ma insisted, even after my pa died. She taught me herself when we couldn't afford for me to miss work." His gaze met hers. "She would have liked you. She believed education was the only way forward." "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was." The simple past tense told Vivian all she needed to know. Finn continued his inspection, pointing out not just the leaky roof but several other issues: loose floorboards, a window that wouldn't open properly, a door hinge worn to breaking. "You have a good eye," Vivian observed. "Worked as a carpenter's apprentice before I took to the cattle drives," he explained. "Always had a knack for seeing what's broken. And fixing it?" His smile reached his eyes this time. "That's the satisfying part." The school board meeting that afternoon went better than Vivian had expected. The 5 members, including the mayor and the general store owner, were so eager to move past the awkwardness of her canceled wedding that they readily approved hiring Finn for the repair work. The fact that he accepted modest compensation didn't hurt his case. As June gave way to July, Finn became a familiar sight around Copper Creek. He worked on the schoolhouse in the mornings before the summer heat became unbearable, then took odd jobs around town in the afternoons. Vivian, free from teaching duties until September, found herself spending more and more time at the schoolhouse, ostensibly organizing for the coming term. They fell into an easy companionship, sharing lunch in the shade of the big cottonwood tree behind the school. Vivian learned that Finn had fought for the Union in the war despite his Texas upbringing, that he played the harmonica but only when he thought no one was listening, and that he had a talent for whittling small wooden animals that delighted the town's children. Finn, in turn, discovered Vivian's passion for poetry, her habit of singing to herself when deep in thought, and her surprisingly progressive views on women's suffrage. He teased her gently about her Eastern education, but listened intently when she read aloud from Emerson or Thoreau. It was during one such lunch, nearly a month after Finn's arrival, that Thomas Whitley finally showed his face in town again. Vivian and Finn were sharing a loaf of fresh bread and some cheese when a shadow fell across their picnic cloth. Vivian looked up to see her former fiancé standing awkwardly before them, hat in hand. "Vivian," Thomas said, his voice strained. "May I speak with you, privately?" Finn tensed beside her, but Vivian placed a restraining hand on his arm. "Anything you have to say to me can be said in front of Mr. Xavier." Thomas's eyes flicked to Finn, then back to Vivian. "I've come to apologize. What I did was unforgivable. Yet here you are, seeking forgiveness," Vivian observed coolly. "My father," Thomas began, then stopped himself. "No, I won't make excuses. I was a coward. I let my father convince me that marrying a schoolteacher was beneath our family's station, but I've realized my mistake." "Your mistake," Vivian repeated, her voice steady despite the anger bubbling inside her. "Is that what you call leaving me at the altar? A mistake?" Thomas had the grace to look ashamed. "I deserve your contempt, but I'm hoping, in time, you might find it in your heart to give me another chance." Finn shifted beside her, and Vivian could feel the tension radiating from him. She placed her hand over his, a gesture not lost on Thomas. "I think," Vivian said carefully, "that your mistake may have been the most fortunate thing that's ever happened to me." Thomas's face flushed. "I see. Well then, I'll trouble you no further." He placed his hat back on his head and turned to go, then paused. "He's just a drifter, Vivian. He'll move on when winter comes." After Thomas was out of earshot, Finn let out a low whistle. "You handled that with more grace than he deserved." Vivian sighed. "A month ago, I would have given anything to hear that apology. Now, I can't imagine why I ever thought we'd suit." "And what about what he said, about me being a drifter?" Finn's voice was carefully neutral, but Vivian caught the uncertainty beneath. "Are you?" she asked directly. "Planning to move on when winter comes?" Finn was silent for a long moment, his eyes on the distant mountains. "I haven't stayed in one place longer than a season since the war ended, but, Vivian prompted when he didn't continue, his eyes, so blue in the bright sunlight, met hers. "But I've never had a reason to stay before." The air between them seemed charged with possibility. Vivian found herself holding her breath, waiting for what might come next. But the moment was broken by the school bell, ringing to signal the town council meeting. "We should go," Vivian said reluctantly. "Mayor Patterson wanted us to update the council on the repairs." Finn nodded, getting to his feet and offering her his hand. The simple touch sent warmth spreading through her, a feeling both alarming and exhilarating. As July turned to August, Vivian found herself falling deeper into a feeling she hardly dared name. Finn completed the schoolhouse repairs, but found plenty of other work around town. He'd taken a room at Mrs. Hollister's boarding house and showed no signs of moving on. The town, initially curious about the newcomer, had largely accepted him, especially after he single-handedly repaired the church roof free of charge. Even Vivian's father had warmed to him after Finn helped fix a broken wagon wheel that would have cost a small fortune to replace. It was Mrs. Hollister who first voiced what many were thinking. "That young man's sweet on you, Vivian," she said one afternoon as Vivian stopped by the boarding house to deliver some books Finn had expressed interest in. Vivian felt her cheeks grow warm. "We're friends, Mrs. Hollister." The older woman snorted. "I've seen the way he looks at you when he thinks no one's watching, and I've seen the way you look at him too. Life's too short to dance around what's right in front of you, especially out here." The words stayed with Vivian as she walked home, the setting sun painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. Was it so obvious to everyone? And if so, why hadn't Finn said anything? They'd grown so close over the summer, sharing stories and dreams, yet always maintaining a careful distance. The answer came unexpectedly the following Sunday. After church services, Finn asked if she'd join him for a ride. "There's a place I'd like to show you," he said, his expression unreadable. They rode out of town on horses borrowed from the livery, Finn leading the way into the foothills. The day was clear and bright, with just enough breeze to keep the heat bearable. After about an hour's ride, they came to a small valley tucked between two ridges. A clear stream ran through it, bordered by cottonwoods and wildflowers. "It's beautiful," Vivian breathed as they dismounted. "How did you find it?" "Been exploring on Sundays," Finn replied, tethering the horses where they could drink from the stream. "Thought you might appreciate the view." They sat beneath a towering cottonwood, the dappled sunlight playing across the blanket Finn had brought. He seemed uncharacteristically nervous, fidgeting with his hat before finally setting it aside. "Vivian," he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. "Yes," she encouraged, her heart beating faster. "I've been thinking a lot about what Thomas said, about me being a drifter." He met her eyes directly. "I want you to know that's not who I am anymore, or at least not who I want to be." "What are you saying, Finn?" Vivian asked, hardly daring to hope. He took a deep breath. "I'm saying that I bought land, this land in fact." He gestured to the valley around them. 50 acres. The stream runs year-round and the soil's good. I'm going to build a house, right there on that rise. Vivian followed his pointing finger to a gentle slope overlooking the stream. "You're staying in Copper Creek." "That depends," Finn said, his voice soft. "On whether there's someone worth staying for." Vivian's breath caught in her throat. "Finn." "I know it's fast," he continued quickly. "We've only known each other a couple months, and I know you just got out of an engagement. I'm not asking for promises, just possibilities." "What kind of possibilities?" Vivian asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, Finn reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden carving. It was a bell, intricately detailed despite its small size. "To remind us how we met," he said, placing it in her palm. "And that sometimes luck needs a little help." Vivian's fingers closed around the carving, feeling the smooth texture of the wood worn by Finn's careful hands. "It's perfect." "Vivian," Finn said, his voice serious now, "I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you. I know I'm not a banker's son or a businessman. I'm just a former cowboy trying to put down roots. But if you could see yourself building a life here, with me," Vivian didn't let him finish. She leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a kiss that held all the words she couldn't yet say. Finn's surprise lasted only a moment before he responded, his hand gently cupping her face. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Finn's blue eyes were wide with wonder. "I take it that's a yes to possibilities," Vivian laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "That's a yes to possibilities, Finn Xavier." and maybe in time to more. The first frost of October had come and gone by the time the cabin was finished. It was small but sturdy, built with the help of half the men in Copper Creek, who turned the construction into a community affair. Vivian had continued teaching at the school, riding out to the valley whenever she could to watch the progress. The town had buzzed with speculation about their relationship, but Vivian found she didn't mind the gossip now. It was different when the talk was of new beginnings rather than humiliating endings. On a crisp November afternoon, Finn rode into town and straight to the schoolhouse. The children were just being dismissed, and they crowded around him, asking about the cabin and the 2 new colts he'd acquired. "It's finished," he told Vivian when the last child had run home. "Come see." The cabin was everything she'd imagined and more, simple but thoughtfully designed with large windows to catch the light and a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Finn had even built bookshelves, already stocked with the volumes they both treasured. "What do you think?" he asked, watching her take it all in. "Is it something you could call home?" Vivian turned to him, her heart so full she could hardly speak. "It's perfect, Finn, absolutely perfect." He crossed to where she stood and took both her hands in his. "Then marry me, Vivian O'Malley, not next year or next month, but now. Before winter truly sets in, we can have the ceremony right here with just our closest friends." "Are you sure?" Vivian asked, searching his face. "You don't think it's too soon?" Finn's smile was tender. "I've been sure since the moment I saw you sitting on those church steps, looking like your world had ended. I knew then I wanted to be the one to help you build a new one." Vivian rose on tiptoe to kiss him, her decision made. "Yes, Finn Xavier, I'll marry you." They were wed 2 weeks later on a Saturday afternoon as the sun began its early winter descent. Reverend Thompson performed the ceremony in front of the fireplace with Vivian's parents, Mrs. Hollister, and a few others from town in attendance. Vivian wore a simple dress of deep blue, with wildflowers in her hair that Finn had somehow found despite the season. As they exchanged vows, Vivian thought about the twists of fate that had brought them to this moment. If Thomas hadn't left her, if Finn hadn't ridden into town that very day, if he hadn't rung the bell. When Reverend Thompson pronounced them husband and wife, Finn surprised everyone by producing a small bell from his pocket, a proper metal one this time, not a carving. "I thought we should make it official," he said, and rang it 3 times, the clear tone filling their new home with promise. The years that followed were not without hardship. The land was demanding, and their first winter together tested them in ways they couldn't have anticipated. But they faced each challenge side by side, their partnership growing stronger with each passing season. By the spring of 1877, Vivian was expecting their first child. She continued teaching until it became impractical, then welcomed their daughter, Elizabeth, in the summer. 2 years later, their son James joined the family. The cabin expanded as their family did, with Finn adding rooms as needed, always with those same careful, capable hands. The valley flourished under their care. Finn proved to have a talent for ranching, starting with a small herd that grew steadily over the years. Vivian eventually opened a small school right on their property, teaching not just their own children but those from neighboring homesteads too distant from town for daily travel. There were difficult times, droughts, illnesses, the constant uncertainties of frontier life. But there was also deep joy in the life they built together, a joy neither had quite believed possible on that June day when fate and a church bell brought them together. On their 10th anniversary, Finn took Vivian back to the old church in Copper Creek. The town had grown, with new businesses lining the main street and more families settling in the surrounding area. But the church remained largely unchanged, its bell still hanging in the small tower. They stood together at the bottom of the steps, remembering. "Do you ever think about him?" Finn asked quietly. "Thomas," Vivian shook her head. "Not anymore. I heard he married a banker's daughter from Santa Fe. I hope he's happy." "Are you?" Finn asked, his arm around her waist. "Happy." Vivian turned to face him, taking in the familiar features now lined with a decade of sun and laughter. His hair had a few strands of silver at the temples, and the crinkles around his eyes had deepened. But those eyes were still the same startling blue that had caught her attention all those years ago. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she answered honestly. "Every day, I thank whatever twist of fate brought you to this church on that particular day." "It wasn't fate," Finn said with a mysterious smile. "It was the bell." "The bell?" Vivian looked confused. "I heard it earlier that day when the wedding was supposed to happen. I was passing through, hadn't planned to stay. But there was something about the sound, one solitary ring, like someone had bumped it accidentally. It drew me back later, and there you were." Vivian stared at him in amazement. "All this time, I thought you were just being kind when you said an unrung bell brings bad luck." "Oh, I believe that part too," Finn assured her. "That's why I had to ring it properly, to change your luck." His eyes twinkled. "And mine," Vivian laughed, the sound as clear and bright as a bell itself. "Well, Mr. Xavier, I'd say it worked." "Indeed it did, Mrs. Xavier," Finn agreed, and kissed her there on the steps where their story had begun, the bell above them silent but watchful, witness to the love that had flourished from the most unexpected of meetings on that summer day in 1875.